Well, it is morning here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Raleigh, North Carolina is in the American South, but Raleigh, North Carolina is not in the global South. Now, I want to talk about a few terms, just musings, and much of this is just off the top of my head. Um, as I talk about them, but um, with that being said, I do want to get into some. So one of them I do want to talk about is indeed, if you will, um, this idea of global north and global south. Although typically, you may be more familiar with the term global south. And in some ways, maybe global north and global south actually take place. And I actually have a video talking about this, I believe in PowerPoint. Um, for when we luckily you don't get to see this face that I get to see every morning. In regards to first world, second world, and third world, so that seems to be taking the place, or at the very least sharing space, um, with this idea of global north and global south. Um, First world, developed, industrialized countries. Second world, um, well, at the time was considered communist countries. I believe that there may have been some change on that, but the second world really was in regards to how the institutions. What were the institutions like? And if you basically were a communist government, they were considered to have, if you will, institutions that would fit um, solidly within the second world. And then third world were developing countries. Um, Although I guess you could be a case like Cuba, and Cuba, you could very well be the case of Cuba. Cuba might have been considered somewhere of probably third world, but I could see some people putting that in the second world. Okay, so global north and global south. So when you hear that, and maybe you're already familiar with this, and maybe you Google stuff all the time. Um, Oftentimes when you hear it, you think of it geographically, right? That didn't take me too long to figure it all out by myself. But with that being said, you may actually consider it to be um, the geographic term. So basically, anything above the equator, or maybe anything above the tropics, um, would be, if you will, global north, and anything below the tropics or below the equator would be, if you will, global south. All right. Well, here's the issue with global north. Okay, so global north is referring to developed countries, highly developed countries. Um, Typically, what would we call democratic institutions. I've always wanted to talk about democracy. I would probably say more along the lines of Republican institutions because that would be more accurate. But with that being said, democratic institutions, um, higher standard of living, you know, um, these would be considered global north countries. So industrialized economies, higher standard of living typically, um, and democratic institutions. Okay, because that might help you a little bit. Because when you think of Australia, the land down under, right? There aren't too many countries that go further south than that. I'm trying to think of one. Right? Um, You might be thinking, well, my goodness, well, Australia is in the South Pacific. It's down south. It's definitely a global south country. Well, no, 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 no. Australia would indeed be considered, if you will, and New Zealand, global north countries because of what is considered their higher standard of living, their democratic institutions, and their industrialized economy. Well, Russia, boy, I'm trying to think of a country that's further north than Russia. I mean, Russia's up there, right? I mean, they have what we consider to be the coldest major city on earth. Cold, right? Well, Russia is indeed considered a country. Well, okay, it's being increasingly associated. So more and more so, we are associating Russia with the global South. And a lot of that has to do with their institutions. They're not considered to be particularly democratic institutions. Oftentimes, Russia is considered a kleptocracy. And a confirmed kleptocracy is not, we're not going to include a kleptocracy, at least, as some people see Russia, in the global north. Now also, I should say that most what we consider to be developed countries, most developed countries are indeed north of the equator. You know, most of the or a good number of the European countries, and obviously the United States, Canada, so on and so forth, are considered global north countries. Oh, boy, hang on a second. Just below the United States is Mexico. And Mexico is in North America. And some people be like, well, no, it's in Latin America. Yeah, Latin America, but some of Latin America is in the Caribbean, and all those countries are actually considered to be part of North America, by the way. And some Latin American countries are in South America, some in Central America and Mexico. Okay, well, Mexico's part of, if you will, Central America. No. Actually, Central America starts after Mexico. And I will tell you Central America is part of it too. Anyway, what I'm trying to tell you is that Mexico is indeed considered part of the global South. Why? Developing economy, so not a highly industrialized economy. It's a major issue. I don't think they have too big of a deal on its institutions and standard of living. Okay. Trying to think of what else I want to say in regards to the global north and the global south. Obviously, the United States is considered part of the global south. Here's another one that's interesting. Think of a country like UAE and Dubai, which is outrageously rich, right? The UAE and Dubai, the UAE is considered a global south country. Well, think of Israel. And by the way, most Middle Eastern countries are considered to be part of the global south. But that's not the case with Israel. Israel is considered to be part of global north. Why? Because of its supposedly higher standard of living, I guess, because of its democratic institutions, and because of its supposedly industrialized economy. Now, there are some questions about whether or not Israel is that democratic. Right? Because, obviously you have human rights issues in regards to the people in Palestine. So, what do you do about that? There may be some questions. I think there's a whole lot of questions about it. And how some of those folks, live inside Israel. So, every single one of the global north countries, if you will, or global south countries, every single one of the global south. So every single country that's in South America, without exception, is considered part of the global south. Um, Many of the Asian countries are. Japan is not included in that. Um, every single one in Africa is considered to be part of the global south. So there you have it there. Um, Japan is considered part of the global north. Now, China is considered part of the global south. Now, once again, this is a country that's fairly up north. India is considered part of the global south too, by the way. But hey, first of all, China is highly industrialized, right? Highly industrialized. And the standard of living isn't too bad, but it's highly industrialized, right? It is the second largest economy on earth. Only the United States has a larger industrial economy. Where China's issues are within the institutions, right? So they consider it to be the government, still to be a communist government, even though the economy has certainly moved away from that. But it's still considered a country that doesn't have a clean track record on human rights abuses. You could make an argument for a few others too. Um, Still delivered from my understanding is fine. But that's where they get China. Um, Trying to think here, something about Israel I wanted to bring up. So interesting dynamic on Israel and the UAE, right? And some of this is, well, a lot of this is clearly, if you will, subjective. I think you could make an argument that you possibly could put Israel, if you will, in the global south, in regards to some of the human rights abuses that are being alleged, at least. Um, but you know what? Given the fact that it is considered a democracy, or I would say a republic, you do have that. Anyway, trying to be as objective as I can on that. All right, you know what? This one looks to be a bit long, so I am going to cut it off there. I hope this helps you, or gives you some idea of what we're talking about when we talk about the global north and the global south. Hey, y'all, take care.